Welcome back to episode 4 of the One Brick at a Time podcast. Here with Alex again today to talk about Trump's first 24 hours in office. We're going to talk about the inauguration a little bit to start off with, and then we have a slew of executive orders to go through. Alex, how are you feeling today with this new president? New president,
Uh,
do this.
Everything feels kind of up in the air. We don't really know what's coming down the pipe except for like 1,000 executive orders. And I'm very excited for the slew. It was good use of the word slew, by the way. So you should be proud of that.
Thank you, I appreciate that. I do love a good slew.
Yeah. Well,
That is
depends
that
on.
is one thing people say about me.
It's like the only thing people say about you, actually.
It says under my yearbook. It's my superlative. Love slews.
Well, that sounds off. All right, no, but yes, walk us through our agenda for today, Xavier. Let's get going because I know we have a ton to cover, a
We
slew
do have
worth to
quite a bit
cover.
to cover. There's a lot going on. Not a lot of it is not a ton of huge news, but enough medium-sized things have happened that it's worth us getting into. So let's get right into it. I did not watch the inauguration, but you did.
Yeah, I did. The inauguration was interesting. They, it was actually funny. They had, all the typical stuff, people speaking about the vision for the future, all this stuff. The prayer was something I particularly enjoyed because they opened up with a rabbi, I believe, who gave a nice prayer. And then the second guy to go was somebody who gave like a very impassioned speech, very Martin Luther King esque, which was fitting for the day. Really just like went all in, high energy, high passion. And then the third guy to give a speech was, I think, a pastor or a priest, and it was really muted. So like they put in the
Oh,
closer well before, like that guy should have closed the show, but he
sure.
got everybody's energy up. And then the third guy was like, well, everyone bow their heads, and then like it got really low key. So I thought that was really funny how they didn't space those guys out properly.
What would
But
you say? I didn't watch, which feels weird. Normally, I'm all over. I'll sit and make time for a vice presidential debate, right? I
yeah,
watched the House of Representatives debate in my district that had like 500 total viewers.
hmm
Um, so usually I'm into that kind of thing, but I just did not. One, I just was very tired and didn't
yeah,
want to watch an inauguration. But I was sort of gearing up for the week of actual stuff,
hmm
and I didn't feel like there was going to be anything shared there that was new or something that we hadn't heard on the campaign trail or anything like that.
No, the his speech was really interesting. I think it was much more low key. He wasn't like as like high energy, which maybe is just because it's 8 years before his last inauguration. Um, right? I did the
No,
math
you're good.
properly.
I had to do the
Yeah,
math on that, but yeah, it's 8 years.
8 years from his last inauguration. Maybe that's part of it, but he also just seemed a little bit more like matter of fact. There were some things he said that was like, okay, that's a reasonable thing for someone to say. And then there were moments, like I told you, I think before, where he sounded kind of like a Sith Lord. So I was like, okay, like I'm getting the vibe here. But he said it very calmly, which almost made it a little more eerie at times. But sometimes it was just discussing things that like I think are tough to discuss, like immigration and like deportation and kind of stuff that like kind of feels dark, I guess.
Sure.
But they talked a lot about sunlight and gold. Said a lot of golden era type stuff.
Golden era stuff. I saw the headline. I was getting groceries earlier, and I saw the headline: "America's decline is over."
Yeah,
Okay, that was kind of the
it was very passive aggressive towards the previous
right.
administration. The entire speech was just like, well, whoever ran it before me, not going to name names, really screwed things up. And he just kept basically saying that over and over again.
Sure.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, we'll see. We'll see if he can bring us back a little bit, right?
Yeah.
We'll see if he can fix the problems that we have. He had his first 24 hours to do what he can. So,
Yep.
generally speaking, the first 90 days of any administration really set the tone for what's going to happen. I'm not surprised we haven't seen anything too crazy. I'm a little surprised with some of the executive orders that they kind of did first. So we'll talk about that a little bit. Nothing is surprising. It's just these are the ones as the week is going to go on, you're going to lose free news coverage. Now, the Trump administration has no problem just finding news coverage out of nowhere. They're very
Mhm.
good at earned media, um, which I believe we've talked about before, but just a reminder. Paid media is when you go out and like buy a commercial. Earned media is you've just done something that the media wants to cover. It's free, right?
Mm.
The Trump administration does a really good job of that anyway. So it doesn't quite matter as much for them as others, but usually you want to do stuff in that first 24 hours, first week, that really set the tone for the rest of the administration.
Mhm.
So let's get into some of these executive orders. If you're anything else on the inauguration, did I
It
miss anything
oh all
important? Not
the
having
only the
watched
thing
it.
I love more than anything is the Baron Trump Greenland memes where it's like Greenland is Baron Trump's Dune, and that has been killing me
What?
because you know the plot of Dune.
I don't know the plot of Dune.
I'm not going to ruin it big time.
Okay.
There's this guy who's basically like the son of an emperor, and Dune, this planet of like these like people who live in the sand and have this really like great resource of like this stuff that's good for space travel or whatever. It's like his birthright. So there's all these like funny Dune esque Baron Trump memes where it's like a giant picture of Baron Trump looming over Greenland, like this is his planet to conquer, and it's a lot funnier if you actually understand the plot of Dune.
Oh, okay. Baron is also like 6'8". or
It's
something
crazy. It's
crazy.
crazy.
I saw a picture of him standing next to his dad, and he's a tower. He is
Yeah.
wide. Because Donald Trump is not short. He's like solidly 6 feet
Yeah.
at least, and he towers over his father.
Yeah. Baron's scary.
Hmm.
He kind of creeps me out.
Is he still a
You know what?
minor?
You know
Or
what?
can
That's yeah. I don't know. That's not me. It's mean to say. I do remember. I do.
we-
I do remember one thing that came out, which was pretty unfair about Baron Trump. And again, I don't know him, but it was an email where it's like, or not. Sorry, not email. There was like an article that came out about Baron where he was trying to get people's discords at college or high school or whatever, so he could play video games with people. And they reported it like he was stalking people for their Discord names, and everyone's like, "What an insane way to report just trying to make friends!" Like it was like the most unfair representation of like I just want to game with friends. Like, oh my
I have
god,
no beef with Baron Trump.
yeah. Until he dunes Greenland, we're
That's
chill.
like Dune's Greenland.
Yeah,
I don't know. He's just too early in his life to
yeah. It's not fair.
judge harshly.
Not fair. Yeah.
Let's go into. Let's start with the stupidest one first. Let's start with the one that's just dumb, which is the executive order that the Gulf of Mexico will be referred to as the Gulf of America. I
Like
saw
why?
this like floating around, and then my students told me about it today, and I hadn't realized this was a real thing that had happened.
Yeah.
A student had a really good question today, which was, but what is everyone else going to call it? Like other countries, are they just going to keep calling it the Gulf of Mexico? And I was like, yeah, probably.
Yeah.
I don't know what this does.
It does nothing.
Um,
So dumb.
as like memeable as these things are, because this is like, it doesn't change anything. It doesn't
Yeah.
do anything important. It still frustrates the hell out of me because that means that
Yeah.
government agencies are going to have to take the time to change all the paperwork and
Yeah.
it's stuff that takes time, effort, resources, etc.
Yeah.
away from stuff that could actually be helping people.
It's just so
this,
inconsequential. Who cares?
right.
Mm.
So that happened. I don't know if this will go anywhere. I wouldn't be surprised if in a month this just kind of falls off everybody's radar.
It should. Yeah.
Never mind, you know.
It sounds like a patriotic talking point, which, okay.
Is it even patriotic?
It says that it has the word America in it, so yeah.
I suppose.
But that's about, like, and I'm, even if you are, like, a supporter of Trump, like, it should be like, well, I don't care. Like, focus on the other stuff.
On the first day.
Yeah, like
this was high on the priority list.
Yeah,
What the hell?
it was part of his inauguration speech. And I was sitting there like, what? Like, okay. I don't care. Like, no one,
speaking of patriotism,
you know how little I think about the
Go
Gulf
ahead.
of Mexico?
I haven't thought about it.
Almost never.
Maybe not at all in 2024 until
Yeah,
December.
Maybe if you live closer, it's a huge deal.
Yeah, no, I don't.
Yeah.
Not a single thing. Speaking of patriotism, though, this one kind of stung. I consider myself relatively patriotic,
Mhm.
but the pardoning of the January 6th defendants,
Yeah.
blanket pardon, anyone who had anything to do with that, everyone's out. The guy who had the bison, he went in shirtless with the bison
Classic.
cape. That
Classic
dude is
look.
walking a free man today.
Classic look, dude.
He put out a tweet of a like drawn picture of him,
Mm-hmm.
a cartoon, and said, "I'm free. Thank you, President Trump. I'm gonna go buy some effing guns." And I was like, okay, that guy is a caricature of a person.
Yep.
He's leaning in.
He's gonna try to capitalize on it, obviously.
Right.
He will
right.
have a YouTube channel if he doesn't already. Like 100%. Yeah, I don't know. I don't know enough about like who got arrested for like a silly reason, if that's true. Because he pardoned what, like 1,500 or
1,500 is a lot. Man.
Isn't that what you said?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, like maybe some of them like did just get arrested for just being nearby.
Sure.
So like
absolutely.
I don't know if like I can't speak for the whole thing, but for anybody who like assaulted anybody or like
Right.
broke in, attacked somebody, that's no, you should. It obviously is not something that you should pardon people for.
I will say credit to the FBI for finding the identity and being able to arrest and prosecute 1,500 people.
Well, that's why it's concerning. Is like that's the only reason I say that disclaimer is because
Sure.
like how did they actually
It was a
identify
lot
1,500
of social media tips, like,
and like
if you see someone in this video, can you let us know who this is?
Yeah.
I'm pretty outspoken on January 6th. This is an issue that normally I try to see both sides on. This is one that I'm pretty staunch and
yeah. There's not really much you can
I think
say
this
about
is
it.
silly. I do think you have a point that if it was, everyone who got caught for trespassing, we're gonna pardon. But if you got popped for like assault of an officer or something,
Yeah, exactly.
You're gonna stay in the pen. But
like if you just walked in and didn't do anything and just like, okay, well, that was weird, and walked out, you don't need to go to prison.
Right.
Like,
no, I'm with you.
Yeah, I'm in the middle on that. Not in support of that whole thing, but of the pardoning. If they didn't do anything violent and they just kind of walked in, nobody cares. Let them out. Who cares?
Right.
Yeah.
So.
Plus, pardons are pardons, now pardons, they're just getting tossed left and right.
We're pardoning everybody.
Yeah, come on. I think I got pardoned.
We should do a crime just to see if we can get pardoned.
You'd be like, yo, throw one my way, dude.
Yeah, you got the pen out already.
Yeah.
You got the form sitting right next to you.
I think he's using like a basic Sharpie on all those things.
That'd be really cool. That'd be kind of gangster. I think everyone else has really fancy pens and stuff.
I genuinely think he's using like a Sharpie. I watched a video of him.
Take an expo marker.
He spit it. Also, I saw him signing some of those today. You're fine. We'll edit it out. We'll cut that in post. I've been waiting to say cut that in post. Let's go. Give it a hard stop. You know what's interesting is I was watching him sign executive orders today, and like he was answering questions while signing them. His signature takes like 45 seconds.
Is it really slow?
Oh, it's so
he doesn't have a
long.
long name. His last name is 5 letters.
I think he's writing Donald, John, Trump, like every single time, first, middle, and last on every single one.
That's incredible.
Yeah, I was watching. I'm like, is he still signing the same thing? It's nuts.
I wonder if he does that for all of them or just when the cameras are on.
Maybe it's just DT on all the other ones. All right, yeah, but pardons, man.
But yeah, the other pardons that happened within that same day, like on their way to the inauguration, Biden pardoned like the rest of his family. He's like, man, I don't know what this Trump did. The whole thing is Biden is really concerned about the Trump administration just going after his family members randomly.
Yeah, it doesn't ring that way though. Not a good move.
Yeah, it feels bad. I get it. Again, as like an individual who cares about my family and friends, is it something I would consider? Absolutely. Also, he's 82. Biden's gonna die soon. Like, what does he care?
I have issues with the kind of a lot of the pardons. I remember he pardoned his like a whole family. He pardoned Anthony Fauci.
Yeah, preemptively.
I guess I don't understand.
If he pardons them now, that means that the Trump justice
what are they
team
pardoned
can't go after
for?
Him. Just a blanket. Just keeping them protected. It's like you can't investigate this guy for anything.
What if they commit a crime now?
It'd be after the pardon. It depends on the pardon a little bit.
But if it's preemptive,
Fauci is at least protected for anything he did during the Biden administration or during his time.
I guess if you preemptively pardon anybody, wouldn't that by definition be pardoning them for something they have yet to do?
Have yet to be discovered is the way I think about it, not the thing that they've done.
See,
So it matters when the crime took place,
yeah,
not when you found out about the crime.
that's the thing that bothers me. Is like you can
Yeah.
say, well, it's to protect them in case of like a witch hunt. It's like that's also like a really convenient argument. I'm not a conspiracy theorist, but that's how it
Right.
rings to people who hear it. They're like,
Right, because there's a
oh,
case where Anthony
yeah,
Fauci,
sure.
right?
Like,
You could say like Anthony Fauci's maybe like a huge child molester or something like that. I'm not saying he is,
no. We're not
but if
making that
that
claim.
happened, then there would just be no recourse because of the way Biden went about this part.
Yeah, it was just super weird.
But he's just trying to make sure Fauci. My interpretation is he's trying to make sure that Fauci just doesn't get nailed by anything
Yeah.
random. You know, just
It's one of those weird things too that happens every day in politics where since they both did it in a way that is not that chill, everyone be like, well, what about like it's constant whataboutism and it's just exhausting.
I've seen a lot of people just say we probably need to look at this pardon power
Yeah.
just generally and see if we can't change that.
Yeah.
Which I have no dog in that race. I think the pardon power is a little bit aggressive. I would rather it be pardon than inverted, though. Like, I'd rather the power that's really strong be able to protect people as opposed to being able to prosecute people, right? I'd rather have
Yeah.
it that way than the other.
You know, when I was like 12 once, I accidentally stole a chapstick and some gum because I forgot it was in my pocket from a Walgreens. So if he could, strike
I think
that one.
the statute of limitations has probably passed on that. I think you're clean.
Oh, well, I just changed my name and like all this information to get away. Okay. well, all right. We'll worry about that later.
So that's any questions on pardoning?
No questions on pardoning.
Okay, we've talked about it
think-
before, so this
Yeah.
isn't new. You're basically an expert at this point.
Well.
WHO and the Paris Climate Agreement. We'll just kind of talk about these two together.
Lame.
No longer part of the WHO. Let's talk Paris first because that one's a little easier. The way I wrote an article on everything that we're going to talk about today, so you can go check that out at Substack. Usually we plug it at the end, but I'll plug it now. The way I wrote it was basically they can use the same PDF from 2016 when they pulled us out of the Paris Climate Agreement the first time.
Yeah.
Just change the date on that and re-sign it. This is the least surprising thing of anything that happened. I had forgotten that Biden had recommitted us to the Paris Climate Agreement.
Yeah.
That's the one thing that was surprising to me, that we were in it in the first place.
Yeah. One thing I heard is like he pulled us out of the Paris Climate Agreement. Was anybody actually like doing what the Paris Climate Agreement said? Like, is it kind of just like yeah, for sure we'll try on paper, and then nobody's doing it? That's what I've read about it. It's just like, yeah, no one actually kind of cares.
I think it does two things, right? And international law is really tricky. It's rarely binding because there's no international police. It's just countries trying to hold each other accountable. It kind of has two roles. One is to just signal the climate and environment is something that we care about. We're going to try to pursue, these types of issues, et cetera, et cetera. The thing is, it's kind of a lot of these countries that agree to it are basically saying, one, it coordinates effort, right? So now we all have one goal we're trying to drill towards instead of each country having a separate plan. So it helps countries kind of coordinate what that climate effort looks like. But in the background, there's this expectation that you're only going to be able to do whatever your domestic politics allows you to do, right? So if our goal is to cut emissions by 50% or whatever, you want to put it on, there's an understanding that in the United States, that's probably going to be very hard to do, just with our current economy and politics and that kind of thing. So,
yeah,
I think the goal with Paris was more, we just need to address that this is an issue and at least coordinate in some way around this issue.
Yeah.
The WHO thing, I have no idea what the benefit of leaving the World Health Organization is. It's not binding at all. It's not expensive to be a part of. There's I think the idea is it's just a bone to throw to people who want to see isolationist foreign policy, who don't like NATO, who don't like the UN and these things. And this is sort of the organization that you can exit without having big immediate consequences.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I also saw that he talked a lot about, maybe this is off topic, we talked a lot about NATO and like I think once them start paying, like, he said like around like
Hey, can you be a
5%.
little closer to your
Yeah.
mic?
Oh shoot.
Thank you.
Yeah. He was talking a
Much
lot
better.
about NATO too in his executive signing. He was talking a lot about how, like, countries paying their quote unquote fair share. Um, yeah, he had a lot of like they need us more than we need them attitude today in his executive or like when he was signing those executive orders, which was interesting. Um, I think that mindset can be helpful at times, especially when you're the United States of America. But I don't know, the whole sense of like we're getting ripped off all the time. I guess I don't fully know how that works specifically with NATO. Maybe he had the same thought with the World Health Organization.
Yeah, and you probably have a better case with the World Health Organization a little bit. In my opinion, the World Health Organization is more from the standpoint of a country like the United States. We don't need it as much as a country that's developing and doesn't have great healthcare in their country. We have good healthcare, we just can't afford it, which the WHO can't really do anything about that. But what
Yeah.
it could do is if we had another big global disease issue, help us coordinate with other countries and do that kind of thing is where the
Mm-hmm.
WHO I think does its best work. With something like NATO, it's a little bit more complex. I think if the United States fought all the other NATO countries, I think we would probably win. It'd be pretty close.
Mm-hmm.
I think if the United States with all the NATO countries fought the rest of the world, we would clean up easily.
Mm-hmm.
I think it wouldn't even be close. Um, US and NATO in probably five in a 78 series.
Yeah.
So NATO is we don't I think what often gets oversold is not the benefit, it is the cost. The cost to NATO is
Yeah.
not that much. If Trump ever did have a point around NATO, it was that our allies didn't spend enough on defense.
Mm-hmm.
Same thing with Paris Climate Agreement has something like a 2 degrees Celsius goal of like we want to keep it underneath this. NATO had a goal of everyone should be spending at least 2% of their GDP or their revenue or whatever on their military. And a lot
Mm-hmm.
of countries in Europe were kind of around that 1% number.
Yeah.
So, to Trump's point, a lot of these countries were not taking defense as seriously as they should have been. I
Yeah.
don't think anyone's suggesting they need to take it as seriously as the United States. We are very unique with our military, which I think is good. I think that's having
Yeah.
the biggest and best military is a great thing. But also having the biggest and best network of allies is also super helpful. So, what
Mm-hmm.
Ukraine kind of did, not Ukraine the country, but the conflict there, is the Germanys, the Frances, the UKs. That was kind of the wake up call that they needed to invest in their military. So the
Yeah.
NATO that Trump had in 2016 and the NATO that exists in 2024
Very different.
is not very different, but
Different.
different enough when you're trying to make that argument of whether we should remain or
Yeah.
not. I will always point out that the only country that's ever used Article 5 of NATO, which is the part that matters, it's the one that says if a NATO country gets attacked, all the other countries are going to join in and help. The only other country that's ever used that is the United States. So,
Mm.
in a way, we've received 100% of the benefit of NATO relative to everybody else.
Yeah.
It was used right after 9/11.
Hmm. Yeah.
It's the only time that's ever been triggered. Immediately, our allies sent air support to make sure there wasn't, a fifth plane. They
Mm-hmm.
helped with the initial securing the country, a little bit with the entry into the Middle East. They kind of dipped off over time after they realized that we didn't really know what we were trying to accomplish.
Yeah.
But yeah, the United States is the only country that's ever gotten value out of NATO in a
Yeah.
direct way.
It's very interesting too. I don't know. I always feel. Remember, I was listening to this is forever ago, but I was listening to a podcast on World War One, and it was always talking. It was a Bismarck, not Bismarck. It's
Bismarck
who's
was earlier.
no, I know who's like
Bismarck, a dog.
who's the all time like German politician, like straight up.
Not Hitler.
Nope, not that guy.
It would be
Um,
Bismarck's the only other one that comes to mind.
Okay, maybe it's Bismarck, but he was always talking. Point is, he was always talking. He's like in a world at the time. There's like 4 superpowers in the world, or like 3. America wasn't one of them.
No,
Like
it
we
wasn't.
weren't a superpower in World
We
War
weren't a
near World War
superpower
One.
till the end of World War II.
Yeah, we were, and we pretty much are a superpower because of World War One and World War Two because we made
Right.
some bank.
We had a lot of money.
a lot of
A
money.
lot of money.
Um, but basically, what he always said was like, in a world with three superpowers, you always need to be friends with two. And it's what like it's like what NATO is. It's like just be part of NATO. Like
Right.
it's just an ultimate like, oh, we're good. Like you need to be on that team, and I think you need to be in good graces with that team. And I have seen people say like with the Ukraine issue, he kind of has a point. They need to at least pay their share of what that costs. But with Ukraine, do you have a sense of like how close they are to that 2% mark, or has it changed based on the Ukrainian
I
conflict?
think they're probably right around. I don't know every country off the top of my head. I just recall, particularly as the election, it was looking like it would be close, and countries
Mm,
realized that Joe Biden wouldn't necessarily be president, or I guess it would be Biden Harris. How however you want to cut that.
yeah,
Countries started sort of preparing for the possibility that Donald Trump might be president and that they'll have to be more self sufficient. So in
yeah,
that time period, they've started investing, and a lot of that stuff takes time, right? Just because you're spending more money doesn't mean it directly translates into more planes and tanks and stuff like that, right? But
hmm,
I would say Europe now is much more aware and proactive about their own defense than it was before. And I think what you said about, we call that polarity.
hmm,
In political science, you have different poles, right? So during
mm,
the Cold War, you would say the world was bipolar: United States, Soviet Union, right? Two clear powers. Everyone
hmm,
picks one side or the other. Uh, in some ways, you could make the argument that we're in a unipolar world right now. That the United States is the only country that like is a clear leader, and that's probably been the case since the turn of the century.
mm,
But I think the USA is still in a tier above itself, but that second tier, it definitely has challengers and rival.
hmm,
China being one, I don't think their success is sustainable. Just looking at their population curve, their
yeah,
big comparative advantage is going to disappear sooner
yeah.
than you'd think. Russia is not the country that it used to be. So to your point, looking at NATO, I would say the other big pull besides China that you would want to be in is the European Union kind of broadly.
Hmm.
And maybe you tack the UK onto that too, because they're not technically in the European Union, but when we think in terms of defense, you can still kind of lump them in together.
Yeah,
Uh, Big question. I didn't think that WHO one was going to be a
it
big
just
point, but
it just gets me so curious on how these like multinational agreements and like organizations work. I think it's super interesting. Because I also remember during for the WHO, this is probably a good thing we should discuss at some point. Um, the constant conflict between the CDC and the WHO, and during COVID, I remember that was like kind of stark. Like there was constant conflicting information coming out from the WHO and the CDC during that time, and I found because I remember it was like a huge point of contention. Everyone's like, well, the WHO says like no masks, and the CDC says two masks, and like it's constantly back and forth. And you should trust the experts, but it's tough when both
the
of the
experts are
experts
conflicted.
are conflicted. Yeah, I remember that was a huge problem.
I go back and forth. So maybe one of my more conservative viewpoints is I think we really overrated the CDC during COVID, which sounds
Mm,
crazy, but let me explain a little bit. Normally, no one listens to the CDC at all, right? If you listen to the CDC, you should wash your hands every time you pet a dog. You should not cook steak anything less well done than well done.
ugh,
And we ignore CDC guidelines every single day, right?
yeah,
That being said, around a big contagious disease, I will take the CDC's advice probably over the WHO most days. Um, and I'll take their advice generally. Uh, where I got a little bit annoyed is it felt like the CDC was so much further behind in terms of easing up on COVID guidelines. When you have a brand new disease that's killing, thousands of people, I'm way more okay with, okay, everyone stay in their house until we can get more information.
yeah.
But it seemed like there was a period where we had enough information, the vaccines had been rolling out, and these types of things where we were still just going with these very aggressive CDC guidelines that didn't seem to have a lot of good science still
Hmm.
behind it, and it didn't seem to. I think the health science was probably there. Let me be very clear. I think the health science was probably there. Doctors, researchers, they were probably 100% correct on what the very best thing to prevent COVID was. Where I would disagree is that we have a whole class of social sciences scientists
Yeah.
who also you need to loop in to make sure that the economy doesn't get fried, right? And You need economists, you need sociologists, you need people like this because a pandemic isn't just the disease is there, but you need to account for all these downstream effects as well.
Yeah. It's
Um,
not that simple because you don't really understand what the public health effect is too of constant isolation for people.
exactly.
Like the rates of, I remember the rates of like drug abuse, alcohol addiction, all that stuff went through the roof during COVID, and a significant portion of people died because of that.
Right. There's
And it's
downstream
like
effects that you got to be
it's
aware of.
something to consider. Same with like learning loss in schools is a nightmare now.
Yes.
Like
Yes.
young kids don't know how to socialize. Like the value of school is tanked because we talked about our education episode.
Yeah.
Constantly hear about district administrators or teachers telling me like kids don't come to class, and it's not because they don't show up. It's because their parents don't care if they go.
Right.
They're like, well, we're in Puerto Vallarta, so like send them the assignments. And
Damn.
it's like being here is important. You need to be able to integrate and like talk with your with your peers, and like discuss things. Like it really took a number on a lot of things that are more social science focused.
Yeah. I mean, there's just more, and the fact that we just went straight from CDC to like now this is policy.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I think that lost the Biden administration a lot of credit with people.
Mm-hmm.
I think that having a little bit more oversight, thinking about these, other issues. I think overall the Biden administration handled COVID, particularly right away, relatively well. It
Mm-hmm.
was getting out of COVID just took forever for the
Mm-hmm.
government guidelines to finally get dropped.
Yeah.
Um, but in terms of conflict, I think the WHO and the CDC probably just have different. They're working within different contexts as well. The WHO doesn't really have the power that the CDC does, right? The CDC, for the most part, is going to be listened to by policymakers here in the United States. The WHO, I would say, is more of like a research focused type thing,
Mm-hmm.
in providing health services to lower income countries.
Yeah.
CDC is very much more focused on being proactive about disease prevention
Yeah.
in the USA.
Yeah. So we're out of
they
the
might conflict. They just are working with different data and have different mindsets about what they're trying to accomplish.
yeah, but we are out of the WHO. Okay, so that's one. Next one.
Let's talk. We got another big topic. Immigration. We've had a few things happen already. So this one is kind of weird, and I made sure to verify this. Within about an hour, this is NPR reported, is the main article that I was kind of going off of. Within about an hour of the inauguration, there is an app that allows asylum seekers. Basically, everything works through this app website thing. That had gone down, and it basically said if you had an appointment to meet with someone from immigration, like that got canceled.
Jesus.
So let's back up a little bit. Let's make sure we understand. Asylum basically says that there is something about you specifically that makes the country you are coming from unsafe, and you need to effectively become a refugee of the country that you're trying to go into, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's kind of like a no questions asked thing. So the prime example is genocide is occurring. The genocide, the other thing you have to prove, the genocide is coming after people like me, right?
Yeah.
You cannot just say, my country is a violent, crappy place and I need to come here.
Mm-hmm.
There needs to be something about you specifically that puts you in danger, right?
Yeah.
So if they started coming after white guys over 6 feet, specifically, I would have an asylum claim.
Wow. What a plug.
I know.
He's over 6 feet, guys.
I
Just
am.
so you know.
If it was just like my neighborhood is crappy and there's
Yeah.
random violence and shootings on the street, even though I'm still kind of in danger in that situation, there's nothing about me specifically that I'm in danger, right? So asylum, it has to be I'm avoiding some sort of persecution.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
It doesn't necessarily have to be like, racial person. It could be about your career.
Anything. Yeah.
Right.
I remember too. There's a huge argument. Tell me how much credence there is to this. I've heard people talk about how like we have a lot of asylum seekers coming from South America and from a lot of places, and they kind of, from what I've heard, they kind of changed the definition of what asylum meant to allow more people in. Is that true? That a talking point? What is
I
that?
don't know that that's necessarily the case. What I will say is that most of these cases that we see right now with asylum are being they're not good. Like, from the person who's making the claim, they're not great cases. And this isn't a judgment on whether, like, immigration, good, bad, whatever. It's just when you look at how asylum is supposed to be used, what has kind of ended up happening is it's kind of a one neat trick to staying in the United States. Is you can just come to the United States, you get popped by, immigration, you make your asylum case. Now we're at least required to have to hear that case, right?
Mm-hmm.
The problem is so many people are trying to make these cases, the court system doesn't move very fast. And
Mm-hmm.
so we have this enormous backlog of these
Mm-hmm.
asylum hearings that we have to get through. The immigration bill that tried to get passed last February, that was supposed to help with this problem, right? It set a limit on how many asylum seekers we could have at once. So once we hit a list of 50,000 or whatever it is, everyone else, sorry, we apologize for your situation, but we're just not going to be able to hear your case. We're going to deport you immediately.
Mm.
It also loaded up a ton of immigration judges specifically to get through this backlog of cases. This got killed because of Trump pressure to Republican lawmakers, because he didn't want to lose the issue, right? He wanted to make sure that
Yeah.
he could still use immigration in the election.
You
And if
can't run on fixing immigration if an immigration solution got put in place.
Yeah, you got it exactly.
Yep.
So this is sort of the problem, right? This So effectively what it seems like it has happened is immigration is just not going to hear any of these asylum cases, right?
Mm.
I don't know how that works, just in terms of the administration and logistics of it. So now we've had a lot of people who are already kind of in a gray area, but at least we know that they're supposed to be processed. And we have a path forward.
Mm-hmm.
So if I'm someone who's seeking asylum and my appointment's gotten canceled, or I can't make an appointment, now what do I do, right? Do I just hang out in the United States? Is someone going to come and deport me? It's unclear what the next step is, right? They got rid of the old system, but they didn't replace it with anything new, right? So I'll be curious to see how this shakes out. I feel like there's going to be news in the coming weeks and months about where this goes.
Mm-hmm.
But that's the first thing I saw reported out of NPR that I thought was kind of interesting. Did you have any questions on that?
No, for the where do we see a specific number of asylum seekers coming from specific countries to our south?
It seems kind of, for a while it was Guatemalan folks seem to be making up a good chunk of it. It's not as many people from Mexico as you would think. It's a lot of people passing through Mexico.
I've heard more like South America.
South and Central. Yeah. Seems to be the majority. But yeah, no, the asylum claims, as far as I know, there's no big genocides or anything like that going on.
That's what I was curious about. I was like, how the claims differed between country, like what the justification is for them. I'm somebody who in the middle. It's like immigration is never just not an issue. I don't believe that you can just have fully open borders. That being said, you do have a responsibility to maintain and like grow and prosper human life across the globe, not just in your own country. So that issue is always interesting to me.
Yeah, no,
there's a lot of immigration executive orders, though. I think he did like 6 straight on his signing today. So what's next?
Yeah, let's talk about the another big one. The birthright citizenship thing is something that's been floating around. So let's talk about this a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
Countries typically fall into sort of 2 buckets with the way they handle citizenship in terms of like babies being born in that country. So they also have a whole bunch of other rules for if I want to move to a country and become a naturalized citizen, or if you want to allow dual citizenship and stuff like that. That's all up to countries. This is very specifically, baby born in place. How do we decide which citizenship you start off with, right, coming into the world? And there are 2 sort of broad buckets we can put them in. The Latin terms, we're going to be fancy today. Jus solis is what the United States currently uses. Solis stands for soil. Just means of the. So of the soil, right?
Mm-hmm.
This is where, like, the physical place that you are at is what matters. So this is what the
Yep.
United States currently has. Currently, or at least 24 hours ago, if you're born on U.S. soil, right, you are in Oklahoma, you are an American citizen, full stop, no questions asked, right? You get a social security card, you're in the system, you are an American.
Okay.
The other system is jus sanguinis, which stands for of the blood, right?
Mm,
More or less what that translates to. And this has to do with who your parents are.
right. Okay.
You can have a combination, but
I was just about to ask you. Okay.
yeah, that focuses more on what country were your parents a citizen of, right? And Trump is sort of moving us from one to the other, seems to be what he's trying to do. Is he's
Mm,
trying to put the emphasis on who were your parents? Are they American citizens? And then that determines whether you're a citizen or not.
mm,
I will say that the reason the United States has the current immigration policy that we do have, I think is kind of fun. The 14th Amendment is what sort of spells this out. And the reason it's the 14th Amendment, the 13th Amendment freed the slaves,
mm-hmm.
right?
Yeah.
But it took them a little bit to realize that we just all of a sudden had a whole bunch of people running around who prior were considered property.
Yeah.
And now we got to figure out how to incorporate these individuals into American society. So
Mm-hmm.
the 14th Amendment just says anyone born in the United States, you're a citizen. Because that was the easiest way to make sure
Yeah.
that slaves, okay, we're just going to make them all citizens and that's good to go, right?
Yeah.
So we currently have just a very easy to interpret of the soil citizenship process right now.
Mm-hmm.
And then there's some other stuff where if you're an American, you get born in like a Canadian hospital, but your parents are American, you're still an American there as well.
Mm-hmm.
Trump is trying to restrict that policy.
Yeah.
So he's got a rule in there about, if your mother is illegal and your father's not a citizen, then you're not a citizen. If people are here on temporary visas and the other parent is a non-citizen, then you're no longer a citizen.
Mm-hmm.
All of this is for sure going to go to court because this is right up against the Constitution. Not a
Mm-hmm.
law made by Congress, like the Constitution. You need an amendment, a whole constitutional convention where two-thirds of the states agree on it to
Yeah.
change this policy.
From what I understood about this, I first thought this was like very, very like not conflicting, not typical. I was like, okay, this feels really weird for America. And then I did some more research too, and how restrictive some like I was shocked at how far to the like unrestricted level America was relative to other first world counterparts. Like Great Britain has I was double checking some of this because I didn't want to just talk out of my ass. But like I was like Great Britain, like the United Kingdom, I should say, has like a pretty strict policy. France, Germany, I think some other ones like yeah,
Spain's got
like
a really interesting one.
Japan, like there's a ton. They all have actual way more
Japan's
restrictions.
ridiculous. It's impossible to be
Yeah.
Japanese.
They all have way more restrictions than America has. Like even when we were looking at like even like countries you think of as like the most progressive, like the Netherlands, like they all have wildly restrictive policies for this rather than America.
Yeah, they didn't. One, again, the way we didn't really do this on purpose, right? We've always had, even after slavery, we were still pretty racist. I think we kind of did this accidentally. If I'm looking at a snapshot of America when the 14th Amendment was passed, I don't think they meant to make it that easy to become an American from somewhere else.
Mm-hmm.
The reason you see this in other countries, particularly the European Union countries that you just listed, right? Keep in mind that getting a European Union passport is super helpful, right? Because then if you can go to one, you can go to a bunch. I play a really nerdy game called Football Manager, right? And it's this hyper detailed
Yeah.
soccer managing sim. So I know a lot of these weird immigration and citizenship rules because to register your team, sometimes you need a certain number of European Union players, or you can only have so many players from not the European Union, is a better way to put it. Spain has this interesting thing where for you and I to become Spanish citizens, it would take us 5 years of being in the country, not committing any major crimes, etc., etc. But for individuals from basically Mexico South, including Brazil, it's only 2 years. So one of the neat tricks you can do in the game is bring a player let's say you're in France, bring them in, but then you loan them to a Spanish team for 2 years, they can then pick up that Spanish citizenship, and then you can register them as a European Union player.
Oh wow.
Um, that's just my nerdy aside. I love citizenship rules. I think it's fun to learn about them.
Yeah.
But yeah, the United States has a very open one
Yeah.
relative to a lot of countries. It's very easy to become an American relative to other places. The time I think is
Yeah.
still, it's a 5 year wait if you're trying to be naturalized. But yeah, no, very, very fast and loose.
Yeah, I thought that like most countries had that and America was going against the grain. It seems like America's been going against the grain for quite a while.
Mhm.
And they're for good or for better or for worse kind of moving more towards what's typical of countries of like
Yeah.
America's stature.
And there's some good cases for it, right? In terms of, I don't know if it's derogatory, but I'm gonna use the term anchor baby, right? Is something
Mhm.
that you might have heard, which is basically if you want to be an American citizen, one of the easiest ways, or to live in the United States, if not necessarily become a citizen, is to come to the U.S. with your, pregnant spouse and have the baby in the United States. And
Like
then
yeah, it's just like
now that that baby is an American, you're allowed to stay in the country because they're your dependent,
mhm.
right? So we see this stuff a lot. I think I prefer the loose citizenship,
Mhm.
let people in. We have no problem locking people up if they do crimes. So,
Yeah.
like, uh, but it's a really big departure from American law, and again, like it's foundational
Yeah, it's going to be
American
tough.
law that our system is the way it is. So,
Yeah. I
I
think
would fully expect this one to go to the courts and get nailed.
I think one thing that is like been I've noticed since we started doing this podcast too is especially with it was right when Trump was pretty much getting into office when we started was you kind of have to parse out because basically everything that Trump does gets like painted with oh Trump did it. It has to be like an isolated incident of like something terrible. Where it's like okay, sometimes it is, and sometimes it actually is kind of on trend. And to give like an accurate picture, you have to understand that like no, America's immigration policy is pretty fast and loose, and
Yeah.
there is a case for maybe not being way too extreme, but maybe closing it up a little bit.
Hmm.
It's not the craziest thing in the world. You can land kind of either way on the fence. No
Like,
pun
here's
intended.
one I would say, like, if I were to change it, I would say you have to be not a citizen per se, but maybe like a resident in the United States for like a year
Yeah.
before, if you're pregnant, you have to have like gotten pregnant in the US.
Yeah. Yeah.
As opposed to coming when you're, 8 months pregnant or whatever it may be. Um,
That's funny.
uh, but yeah, so that's
The southern
that
border's
one is
about to
probably
look
the biggest
wild.
executive order that I've seen.
Yeah.
Or like, the biggest policy
Well,
change.
we have cartels as terrorist organizations, national
I had
emergency at the
forgotten
border.
to write about that one.
Yep.
Let's talk about cartels as
Yeah,
terrorist
I love it.
organizations. Holy crap, that's a good call. Um, Here's the implication of that one. One, I don't necessarily hate this in theory.
Mm-hmm.
However, the difference between just being a criminal organization and a terrorist organization has a lot to do with surveillance, right? We have the Patriot Act.
Mm-hmm.
And so once you're labeled a terrorist organization, that gives the NSA a green light to do a whole bunch of stuff that would otherwise be protected by more
Yeah.
or less the Bill of Rights, right? Um, the biggest one I can think of is like wiretapping.
Mm.
If you've ever seen the show The Wire, you can see all the effort that the police have to go through in order to put a wiretap, in a certain place or on a phone or whatever. Maybe you really have to have a lot of evidence that this is going to help you close your case. With terrorism, that's not the case at all. You can,
Mm.
particularly the feds can really go nuts with surveillance and stuff like that. So, where I would be a little bit nervy on this is if you're in a community that has a lot of, drug related activity and this type of stuff, if you're going to start seeing, if you're in a community that doesn't have a great relationship with law enforcement,
Mm-hmm.
right? If you see this law being a little bit mishandled and police using it too inappropriately, would be kind of the way I would think about it. But
Wouldn't be the first
it's
time.
interesting. We'll see how it goes.
Yeah, that's a really good point. I never thought of it like that. Because I don't know if anybody's like really pro cartel but
No, no.
what's implicated is kind of a good point. You
If
gotta think.
it's probably gonna help us get a lot more bad guys. I'm just concerned that we're gonna get some
Not bad
not
guys.
as bad guys in the process. Yeah, that would
Guys we didn't need to really spend a lot of time on.
right, right.
Yeah.
Same thing with if we want to go back to our J6 example, right?
Yeah.
1,500 feels like a lot.
Yeah.
Um, yeah. What else? Did you
I
have
got
any?
No, he talked about quite a few. Most of them were immigration. Like he talked about just a
Yeah.
few, and then it was like 7 in a row that were immigration he signed today. He got a lot of questions on that. He talked a little bit about Spain for a reason, but I don't remember what BRICS countries.
BRICS. Let's talk about BRICS.
What is BRICS? He had something related to BRICS. I can look
I
it
don't
up
know why
too.
Spain would come up. BRICS stands for Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa.
Mm-hmm.
And this is one of the stickiest things to come out of political science. It's really just shorthand for those countries because someone wrote I don't even think it was a book. I think it was just a normal journal article. But he used that as shorthand basically to talk about like the up and coming the economies that were in the biggest transition. I think this was done in the late 90s, right? So you have Brazil, Russia, or Brazil, India, China, and South Africa were these, sort of explosive economies. And for the most part, he was correct. Russia's a weird little misnomer in there. They were going down the other direction. So they got included because their economy was also shifting, but not
Mm-hmm.
in the same direction as everybody else. That's all that meant, was just the shorthand so this person could communicate this idea about developing economies. Now there's an actual international organization called the BRICS countries because people just
Mm-hmm.
use that shorthand so often that it
Mm-hmm.
got picked up in nomenclature and everyone thought it was an international organization. The actual IO is like 2 years old. They
Mm.
just started having annual meetings like within the last 5 years.
Oh wow. Okay. Yeah, I remember he mentioned those for a reason. I can't remember why. I know it's not very helpful at
It's good.
all.
It's we'll figure it out for. There's certainly going to be news between now and next episode, like for
Yeah.
sure.
A few others too. He talked about national energy emergency,
Yeah, it's fine. We're fine energy wise.
Alaskan wilderness open to oil and gas drilling. Not sure how pumped I am about that.
Yeah, I heard a
Uh,
weird thing that the oil companies were pushing back against deregulation, which
huh.
sounds weird, but I'm almost wondering if they're worried about the oil supply being too high and then the price will crash because flooding the market with oil.
Yeah. Also, um, thinking
Very weird.
about. I am thinking about Alaska too. Or that's got to be such a nightmare. This is so off topic. I have no clue what goes in to installing an oil rig
Yeah, I have no idea. It
in a
sounds really
place like
hard and
Alaska
dangerous.
where it's like a nightmare to get around.
Yeah,
I've tried doing that in the plains when I was an environmental scientist, so that's why I'm not super pumped about the drill baby drill stuff.
hmm
Leave things the way they are. I actually really like the wilderness, and I hope we don't just drill constantly.
right,
Um, but yeah, I've worked on like when I worked in Kansas City, for example, it's a nightmare to get through flat ground, let
right.
alone Alaska. Like that's gonna suck if they do that. But that's off the point. Another big one actually I think is really important. Freezing the federal hiring
Yeah, it's fine. I think we'll be okay.
will be okay. Okay, got it. How do you feel about review the investigative actions of the Biden administration to correct past misconduct by the federal government related to weaponization of law enforcement and the weaponization of the intelligence community?
Remember what we said about Biden pardoning all of his family members to make sure that they didn't get randomly investigated by the Trump
Okay, well,
administration?
there we go. That one's that.
It's probably fine. The like freezing the federal hiring, that's fine. That will get ignored at some point because they'll be like, oh, we just need someone to work in this office or whatever it may be.
Ended remote work policy for the U.S. Employees.
Yeah,
They
good. I'm with them on that.
okay.
You work
Wow.
for the federal government. You get Martin Luther King Day and President's Day off. You can go to work.
Yeah, I think you also can tell like people are more productive in the office. That's something I
Absolutely.
genuinely like. Maybe you're a select person like, no, I get way more done. Good for you. You're not typical. Most people get way more done
Right.
in person.
And I've heard a
Um,
lot of people feel more connected to their workplace too.
oh, for sure. Of
And
course you
like
would.
people are astounded when they get back to the office and instead of having to send like an email, they can just go to some dude's office and be like,
Yeah.
"Hey, can I ask you this 5-minute question?"
Yeah, yeah.
Like people forgot they could do that and how
Yeah.
nice that is to be able to do.
I think if it's possible, a hybrid work environment is probably the best because there
Mhm.
are days where like my daughter's sick, but I can't miss work.
Right.
Just let me go home and work
3
and take
on,
care of
2
it.
off or something
Yeah,
like
three
that.
on,
Yeah.
two off is great. I'm super down for that. And the last one that's kind of concerning, which I did not hear about, he wants to grant top secret clearance to White House staff without going through
Yes.
the traditional vetting procedures.
Yeah, he basically wants to give 6-month security clearance passes.
Why?
Not surprising from the guy who had the top secret documents in his bathroom.
Yeah,
Like, not someone.
there's a reason information is top secret. Maybe we should keep it top secret.
Trump's password is password, bro.
I know, dude.
I'm like,
Me and you should apply for top secret clearance. I think we could get it.
yeah, we need it for our podcast, which
Yeah. Why
big
make all this
shout out Trump
conjecture
a
if we
lot
could just
today.
tell people what's happening? It's way easier. Episodes would be shorter.
He put. Do you know who Carrie Lake is?
I know the name.
She ran for governor in Arizona and then for
That's right.
Senate in Arizona. She got her
Yep.
butt kicked twice because she's like crazy.
Mm.
She okay. So you had old boy running for lieutenant governor,
Mark
governor.
Robinson.
Yeah. So there's Mark Robinson Wild.
He
She's
was.
like one step below.
Oh, dude, he was wild.
He was another level.
His campaign ads were because I live in North Carolina, yeah, so the campaign ads I would see like, what is he talking? Like,
Mark
dude.
Robinson. It's terrifying. You guys did elect him to lieutenant governor.
Oh yeah, no.
Like,
Well,
he
I
won an
didn't.
election there.
I didn't. I wasn't here when that happened. I was not here when that happened. I moved recently.
No,
When I
he
saw
made
his campaign ads, I was in awe of how insane they were.
he made her in charge of. There's like some media, not NPR, but some other news media that runs out of the government, and he made her in charge of that.
Lastly, one that deeply affects us: the TikTok ban. Well, not anymore. It affected us for 12 hours.
No, actually, that was the last one I had on my list. Was the
Oh,
TikTok
then let's
ban.
go.
So that worked out
TikTok
really
ban,
good.
baby.
Yeah. So I actually kind of think Trump might be onto something, but we will pump huge brakes. Let's talk about TikTok ban generally, because I think a lot of people misunderstand what this actually is, right?
Mm-hmm.
So here's the issue. TikTok is owned by a company called ByteDance, which is in China. If you're a company in China, you are beholden to the country
Chinese government.
of China, right? They're
Yep.
allowed to access whatever they need to access. They don't run the company, but they have access to everything and can run the company. Basically, imagine just being able to get yoinked up by the government
Mm-hmm.
at any time, right? Or having to provide them whatever information. I'm not super concerned about Americans' information falling in the wrong hands. People say that, but like, what is info?
Mm-hmm.
I am concerned about the actual security threat that TikTok kind of they screwed up on this. So effectively, this came up to the Senate committee or the House committee or whatever, and it wasn't like at the top of the docket or anything. Most people weren't even thinking about it, but it was working its way kind of through Congress. And so what TikTok did was they sent out TikToks on the app, particularly to people who lived in the areas where these House of Representatives members were. And they're like, hey, call your congressman and tell him to vote no on this bill, right? So if you think about TikTok's demographic, it's like junior high and high schoolers.
Yeah.
And so you got these kids on their lunch break calling up congressmen, and they don't know like the script. They're
Yeah.
just, hey man, if you ban TikTok, I'm gonna come over and whatever. Think about the dumb thing that we would have said,
Yeah.
As a goof in high school. But that proved the point that
It has way too much power.
they moved a bunch of our youth to like making political action, right? This was the thing
Mhm.
that we were afraid of and we weren't sure if it was legit or not. It's like, no, they literally proved their own. If they had done nothing, there's a chance that this wouldn't even be a thing.
Mm-hmm.
But because they actually showed the use case where you might actually be able to mobilize a group of Americans, to do something,
Using TikTok.
that makes
yeah.
it very dangerous. So I am very for what this law says, which
Mhm.
is not that TikTok is banned. It says that TikTok needs to be sold to an American owner, right?
Mhm.
We just need to get it out of Chinese hands. If it's an American owner and they want to run it the exact same way with that beautiful, beautiful algorithm,
With like
that
Twitter or the same way like X or Twitter, whatever you want to call it,
absolutely
Facebook is run. They want it run like those companies.
right, or it just needs to not be in the hands of a foreign power, right?
Yep.
It's that simple. ByteDance has refused to sell TikTok. So it's at the end of the day, it's kind of on them, right? They could have found Musk wanted to buy it, Mr. Beast wanted to buy it for a hot second there. They've gotten offers from people to buy the app, but they've just refused to do so.
Mm.
Biden did not enforce this went to the Supreme Court as a First Amendment issue. The Supreme Court basically said there's a couple qualifications to when you can kind of ignore the First Amendment. One of them is national security. The Supreme Court voted 9-0 to enforce this law. He said this is a national security issue. So this is like one of the few things that Congress could agree on and pass. The president signed, and we got a 9-0 Supreme Court. Like, this thing is like locked and loaded.
That's awesome.
I know. We actually got some cooperation and compromise.
Just to get some cooperation.
I know. However, Biden said, I'm not going to enforce this ban because I've got 36 hours left and I got to spend all my time pardoning people. So you guys figure it out. I'm out. Trump said he's also not going to enforce the ban either. Eventually he'll have to, right? You can't just ignore an act of Congress. Right?
Yeah.
However,
how long do you get? How does that work? What do you mean?
So it's the executive branch, right? So they're supposed to execute the laws. And so he can effectively just tell, I believe it would be the FCC is probably who it would be. Basically Google, iStore, they have to take the app off of the App Store. If they don't, they're going to get fined. They can just say, we're not going to collect the fine.
Oh.
And so, like, they'll be doing something illegal, but we're not going to actually punish them for doing it, right? Eventually, someone will sue and be like, no, you have to, it's a law. You have to follow the law. Right?
Yeah.
But in the meantime, right, Trump can just not enforce this.
What would be the point of not enforcing it? I don't understand.
Because he likes TikTok and he thinks it's good for him and he wants to do the popular thing.
That's upsetting.
Yeah. In the meantime, however, though, he's working with China, threatening China. Actually, I'll just call it what it is. He's basically saying, hey, if you guys don't hand TikTok over to an American company, we are going to tariff the heck out of you. And of all the ways to handle the situation, I think that's actually one of the better ones. Not a fan of tariffs, particularly the 100% tariffs he keeps threatening.
Yeah, he says that a lot.
But I'm kind of okay with him. If the outcome of the situation is ByteDance sells an app that I really like to an American ownership so we can continue operating, and Trump doesn't tariff China in a way that I disagree with, I'll take the win.
Yeah.
I think that would actually be a fine outcome if it just worked out. Now, will this threat work? I have no idea. China is like a very non-emotional country to work with. They're basically run by robots, right? Like they make very calculated, cold decisions. I've never seen like Chinese officials smile. They don't. They're just like, we're really happy to be here.
I've seen just like straight faces.
You lived in China.
Did
they smile?
A lot, yes.
Oh, okay.
I mean, I didn't spend a lot of time with Chinese officials. I was just like around.
Smile.
I didn't spend a lot of time near the government. I spent a lot of time near just regular people, and they were extremely nice.
Probably because the government wasn't around.
Yeah, the internet access was weird in China. Yeah. But China, genuinely gorgeous place, nicest people ever.
I'm sure
they're so nice. I loved everybody in China. They do treat Americans differently, so maybe that was like that. I'm sure that was a huge part of it. But genuinely, China was really cool. Gorgeous nature. Like you wouldn't believe the amount of cool places in China that people don't know exist that are the most stunning.
I mean, there's 2 billion people, right? And it's a pretty physically large country too.
Oh, so it's gigantic. I just mean the amount of like, if you're like into like hiking or a beautiful nature, you have no clue how stunning China is. You don't know unless you've been there and you've seen it. But like most people have no clue how gorgeous that country is.
Not just outside guy.
Oh, it's just unbelievably gorgeous. Okay. I could not believe it. I could not believe how everywhere I went was just absolutely beautiful. Hey, any listeners in Weihai, love your city. Gorgeous place.
Explode in Weihai, China.
Weihai, China, dude.
There's no way this podcast can reach the
it can.
The Great Firewall? Absolutely not.
We'll get to the Great Firewall
in China. Like, let's just wrap our head around that.
That's crazy to think about, isn't it?
Absolutely. That's so funny to me.
That's so that tells you all you need to know. Get rid
Also,
of
any
it.
of our younger
Um,
listeners, don't download that like knockoff Chinese Little Red Book or Red Book. I think it translates to Little Red Book. There's like a knockoff TikTok app that like
oh,
the terms and conditions are in Mandarin.
oh, yeah.
Don't do that. Don't buy a product
Well, you
explicitly
just
from the Chinese
nobody knew
company.
about it until you plugged it.
Oh no, they knew
Um,
about it. They were in there.
I oh my God, I'm actually a big like I know Australia. I don't know if I'm okay with this when it comes to social media, but I think Australia has a rule like you can't have social media until you're like 16, 18, or you have to use like an ID to get an account.
Yeah, we should do that. I'm into it.
There's so much research that suggests social media is terrible for children,
Right.
like utterly horrible for their development and their self-esteem and all this stuff. I think it's very
Well, I
good
just
to
remember the
restrict.
old school concern of there just being creepy people on the internet. Like when we
That's
were
true too.
youth, that was the thing, was just
Creepy people on the internet.
creepy people on the internet.
Don't meet people. It was always like, don't talk to people you don't know on the internet. That
Right.
was always the advice. And now it's just like, oh, do you want this to destroy the way your brain works
Yeah, now
forever?
it's like way too much dopamine way too quickly.
Yeah, and just like really bad for your self esteem, especially among young girls.
Right.
In schools, you're seeing a terrible problem with that. They really need to fix it.
Yeah.
In other words, I'm okay with a TikTok ban personally. I think it's
Yeah,
fine.
I'm partially because I'm addicted to it and I need to the only downside is it's probably the best way for us to plug this.
I know it's
It's
funny.
the
Like
best for discoverability.
I love what we do here, but like
Hey, let me also say I'm gonna look in case this if I clip this and put it on there and the app survives. Come into the comments if you want. I'll be there. That's all I'm saying. I'll be. People were. Oh, that's not how that works. If you have a legitimate question or trying to correct me,
wait,
please do.
really? We're getting comments?
Oh, bro, dude. If you come in with an attitude, though,
Let's go.
if you come in with an attitude, but besides Alex and I, we have like 4 other friends who are all very funny and very mean. Uh, so if you come in respectful,
You're chill.
it's cool.
I
If
also
not,
do love the idea of like some random dude in his kitchen be like, I'm going to argue with this professor of political science about political
easy,
science.
easy.
And it's like,
I only have the master's degree. I only have
okay,
the master's
whatever, dude.
But no, I do this for my job.
This
If
is
you were
this
a
job.
plumber and I came in, I was like, well, that's not how you do those pipes.
Thread a piper is like, shut up.
And again,
That's
if
why
it's an opinion thing that you're up, like whatever,
Mhm.
right?
I'm a firm believer that if all social media disappeared off the face of the earth, we'd lose some cool stuff, but overall the world would be a better place.
Yeah, I mean, just look at like 1998. Like that was
We'd
pretty
like
good.
we'd like net
We had
positive.
internet, but we had no social media.
Yep.
Like it wasn't ever present in your life, and I feel
We-
like that was a pretty good time to be alive.
Yeah, we'd net positive on that.
Right.
I'd be pretty
The
confident.
90s were the only time period I think are worth going back to.
90s were sick,
Just enough
90
internet,
Yeah.
just enough healthcare.
dude.
You know, you're not making huge compromises.
1990 to
Life was
like
really good.
2001 was pretty dope, and then like 2008 to like 2015 ish, 60. I don't know. Maybe I'm missing some big pieces here, but like we had some pretty fun decades.
Yeah, that was. You basically just mentioned like the Democrat administrations.
Well, I'm not.
You basically just went. We're gonna skip right over Bush and go right up to Donald Trump.
Well, if I go back to the 80s, we got who do the conservatives have? Reagan.
2016 to 2020 it wasn't that bad. I'm remiss to say, but
Yeah, no. Well, that's because
it
people.
was panicky.
It's
But
always
like
so
nothing
panicky.
bad
Just
actually
like
ended up happening.
it's just so panicky. It just like
Yeah.
burns me out. But you're seeing this. I will say you're seeing the shoes on the other foot, or like the tables are flipped now. Everyone's being like, "Oh, is it the most important election of our lifetime again?" Like really. And then like because every election
In
cycle,
our
it's the
election-
most important election ever.
2016 was crazy because it was so unexpected.
Yeah.
Was part of it. The only one that I can think of that maybe was more in our lifetime. So we'll say Clinton 2, all the way up to this most recent one. This would be a fun episode idea. Is to just rank the importance of prior presidential elections. My gut
Yeah.
right now says 2008 is probably the biggest one. I think
Mm.
getting Obama into office and the trajectory that had on the country.
Wouldn't
Like I
that-
don't think the difference between like Bush and Al Gore or Bush and Kerry would have been too crazy.
Yeah. How do you feel about? I mean, so like you don't really care about Abraham Lincoln? You think he was
That's
kind
in
of
our
lame?
lifetime, dude.
Oh, I didn't hear that.
Yeah.
Sorry, I'm just like a full American. I try to experience all of our
All of it.
history, not just yours. Um,
Anywho, we're
I'll rant all day. I'm
yeah.
fine with it. Yeah, this is probably the most relatable part of our
Yeah. No, we'll have to do
podcast.
that as an episode. Is we'll do like
to
a
to
list.
plug a hilarious podcast. Just because I thought it was funny. Shane Gillis, Matt and Shane's Secret Podcast have an incredible 4-episode series where they go through every single president
That's a
and they
lot.
rank. It's no, they keep it short. It's really fun.
Gillis and who?
Matt McCusker.
Do they have Louis C.K. on that one?
That yes, they do.
Okay,
Louis
that's
C.K.'s
that
in
one.
that
I'll
one as
have to
well.
rewatch
Yeah, yeah.
that one. Okay,
Oh,
that
it's
one is
so
pretty
good. It's so
Regardless how
good.
you feel about the individuals involved, it's a good podcast.
Yeah,
The one area I'll just hard segue just to make sure that I get this last point in.
yeah.
That they didn't do anything about, and I kind of go back and forth on this, is they didn't really do anything economic in this first day. Granted, it's the first day, right? And economic stuff. I'm not surprised, but I thought we would have had something, right? Even if it's just, I guess declaring like the energy emergency, like something like that. I thought
there's some tariff and trade ones.
What are you looking at? I don't know every executive order.
No, there's a shitload. Don't worry.
It comes up.
There was a lot. A lot of it's like direct federal agencies to begin an investigation into trade practices, including persistent trade deficits and unfair currency practices.
Okay, maybe I missed some stuff then. But
assist China's compliance to a trade deal Trump signed in 2020.
That's fine.
That was one of the tariffs or agreements that was actually left in place throughout the Biden administration, from what I understand.
Trump is fishing for a reason to tariff China. I don't think he just wants to come out and do it. I think he's looking for something to make it look retaliatory, which is like fair enough. Like if you're going to do it, at least having some vague, crappy justification, I think is worth doing.
Yeah. Mount Delaney? What are they renaming Mount Delaney to?
Back to Mount McKinley.
Or Denali. Sorry, Denali.
Back to Mount McKinley.
That's right.
Which, again, we're getting a little too hung up on naming stuff. Okay, so this is kind of the stuff I was expecting. So not anything sweeping. Again, I think once they do like a reconciliation bill, that'll probably be, I bet economic stuff is the first thing they properly legislate on. Maybe we'll see, nothing that gets at like inflation or anything like that. I'm surprised there hasn't been any messaging on, grocery prices or anything like that. That's the one thing that just seems missing from this first. Again, we're only 24, now 30 hours into a new administration. But that would be kind of the gap that I would expect to be filled. That I just haven't heard a lot of messaging on.
Last quick topic for you then.
Yeah, what do we got?
Hegseth, how do we feel?
Like, what do you mean? Like,
didn't he just have a confirmation hearing?
He had the hearings are happening. So Rubio got confirmed today. He's the first one in, Secretary of State.
Sweet.
Which is good. I didn't hear anything about it until it was like he got confirmed. And
he seems pretty, okay.
The most normal pick you can make. Hegseth, I feel like, is probably going to go through. Usually, if you're not going to get confirmed, you kind of know before the confirmation, right?
Yeah.
I've only seen a little bit of the clips as they've just kind of come across my feed. He seems decent at answering the questions. He hasn't. I don't know. I feel like they're not doing a good job, and to be honest, they never really do. Asking him anything
meaningful,
right? Or I don't know. It's a lot of these confirmation hearings are more about the senators and them getting their soundbite than it is about the actual person being confirmed, which is unfortunate. But
that's interesting.
I think he'll probably go through. I'm pretty disappointed in Joni Ernst, who's our senator here in Iowa, and she started out being like anti-Hegseth. She's got a really equivalent experience to what he has. Maybe not quite as decorated, but was kind of in that same level in the military. And she had severe reservations, and then got bullied by Trump into changing her tune. So that sucks. I'll say right now, I will vote for Joni Ernst if she votes no on Hegseth, just because that shows that she's not just a rubber stamp.
Yeah.
If you can just go against Trump one time in a meaningful way.
Politics is a compromise.
Yeah, I don't think it's a compromise.
No.
It's also separation of powers. Like the whole point of the Senate being involved in this nomination process is to make sure that there's some resistance to whatever the president does, right? Like the whole reason we do this is to make sure that the executive branch doesn't just go crazy.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, I don't have any
That's a good
thoughts on
call
him.
bringing that up because those confirmations are starting to come through.
We'll probably cover more confirmations moving forward.
Yeah, today was, but yeah, that's what we got for news?
Pretty much. I
That
mean,
was
there's
more
some...
efficient than I thought it would be. I thought this would be a little bit longer.
No, me too. Me too.
We're also getting better at this.
Yeah.
This was the first episode I came in like not thinking about having to figure stuff out. I was like, no,
We're doing great.
We do our thing.
Yeah.
We make magic.
Should we play some Helldivers or something?
Maybe.
Yeah, there we go, guys.
Maybe Helldivers. I don't know. Is everyone on Marvel Rivals?
People are planning potentially to get on later. This is the super.
Probably be
by
on
the way,
Anyway.
leave this in.
Yeah,
leave this in.
People need to know that we're real people.
Listeners, if you get on, and we'll drop our usernames, not for Marvel Rivals because I can't say that publicly. It's it's not a good one. It's nothing horrible. Don't get me wrong. It's just yeah.
I'm
too
just
much
a bench.
It's too much fun.
That's my name, just a bench.
I'm more scared about people seeing my performance.
Yeah.
Pretty bad at that game.
But yeah, no, we are. Thank you for listening once again. Dealing with our nonsense shenanigans. Hopefully, that was the roundup that you're kind of hoping for in this first day. We'll try to get back at this again next week after some stuff has happened.
Mm-hmm.
Probably going to be a lot of stuff. This, like I said, the first 90 days are going to be when a lot of the magic happens and stuff really gets done. But catch us on, wherever you're watching now, Spotify, YouTube, and Substack are where we're going to continue posting. I'll try to make some clips and post those to TikTok. Those take a little bit longer, so I post as I have time and the availability. We have Instagram.
We have a MySpace. We have a
MySpace.
MySpace.
Right.
We have a MySpace, a Tumblr, a Grindr, a Bumble, and a Hinge.
Find us on Tinder. We'll shout you out if you super like us. God,
Sure.
one of the best things about having a girlfriend long-term relationship is not having to deal with dating apps again. It's talk about social media and being bad for your mental health. Holy crap! All right, we're gonna get out of here.
Yeah.
Thank you for listening.
It's snowing in North Carolina. Apparently, I have to run immediately.
Oh, okay. Good timing then.
I'll see you later.
Take it
Okay.
easy, everybody.
Bye, everyone.